hope we're getting there. God gave the Israelites a leader who could step into the shoes of Moses. Now, can you imagine? Moses had been leading 1 million people. We only have 40,000 people on this island. So 1 million people is a lot of people. The trip into the Promised Land was a divine promise fulfilled, and God wanted someone to lead them, to keep them together. You're going to hear the story, you will be reminded that with faith, courage, and obedience to God's word, we can conquer all challenges. And that's something we all need to remember. Sometimes I completely fall apart, and it's like, oh, God. Joshua received a divine commission. He was given a promise of divine assistance. God spoke to Joshua and said, I will help you. That's what we've got to remember. He'll help us if we just call on him. Emphasis on the importance of obeying the law was handed down to Moses. God would pronounce that he would always be with Joshua. Now, in Joshua's journey, we have some big stumbling blocks, but he told him he would always be there. God says, be strong and courageous, for you must go with the people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors to give them. God had promised them a promised land for ages. Now it's coming. We've got to have patience. I know Lee and I say, we want it done next week. No, God may say, it's not going to be done for a year. So that's usually how things work. This shows the journey that Moses took the Israelites. As Richard has presented before, they could have done it in 2 or 3 days. But this is the journey they took for 40 years. You can see it's about a little bit bigger than the state of Georgia. Can you imagine wandering around in Georgia for 40 years? You would be in land that was hot over by the ocean, and then you'd be in the mountains and everything else. This is what they did. I'm sure many people got discouraged. Moses had been promised the land. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. The people were doing what God wanted them to do. The people were staying together, and they pledged that they would follow Joshua. Now, the interesting thing, if you delve further into the scripture, they actually said that if anyone in these 1 million people decided that they were not going to follow Joshua, they were going to be killed. So this was how important this leadership was. They believed Joshua had stepped into Moses' shoes and was leading them on. Now, when they get to the River Jordan, the first city they have to defeat is Jericho. Now, when Richard gave me this task, not a task, it was a pleasure, the only thing I knew about Joshua was Joshua with the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. That's all I knew. I did not know anything else. So, Jericho was a 2-walled city. Now, this was not the normal situation. We have one large area with the main part of the city in the middle. Then we have another wall going around. There were houses built up against the second wall. And that is very, very important as I go further into the story. Now, Joshua decided to send 2 spies into the city. Now, the king of Jericho knew that there were 1 million people out there. They hadn't gotten there yet, but they knew they were out there. So, when 2 spies came into the city, someone spread the word that there are 2 spies. So now they need to hide. They met a woman named Rahab. She lived in the outer wall. Her house was up against the outer wall. Now, she was a Gentile. She was not a Jew. But she had heard all of the miracles that God had been doing for the Israelites. She had faith in their God, not the one that was surrounding her. The spies were escaped from the people catching them out the window. She helped lower them out the window, and that's why it was so important that it was a two-walled city. So they were long gone by the time the king's guards got there. Rahab tells them that she believes in God. And of course, now they're concerned. Jericho's going to fall. We are going to destroy Jericho. And they say, put a red rope around by one of the windows, and we will save you. This was a journey. Learn patience, which none of us have enough of. The ark represents God's presence, because remember, they're carrying the ark around with them. And in this example, God said cross the river. The problem was when they got to the river, they found it flooded. There was no way that 1 million people were going to walk across that river. You can imagine what would have happened if the water was there. I mean, we were just going to have people falling and slipping and everything. But God said do it anyway. Again, we're back to please seek and follow God's presence, even in your daily decisions. Something happened this morning that was very interesting. This shows you how God works in little ways. Now we don't have a Publix on the island. Now Lee and I normally go to Aldi to get cookies for this evening. And I said, you know, we need to go into Publix and get salt for our water softener. Walked in, behold, were all of Publix's cookies 2 for $1.
Oh, cool.
And that's we were going for salt. And there's all these cookies. So we saved a tremendous amount of money. And it was sort of like, well, God said, go get some salt. We didn't have to get salt. But God said, go get salt, so we did. So that is, to the two of us, an evidence of God's presence. If you start looking for those little things, those tiny things, that's, I think, what made Lee and I so happy. But you have to look for them. As soon as the priest's feet hit the water, guess what? The river stopped. The land dried. And 1 million people were able to walk across the river. This is very much like the story of the Red Sea. Remember when we were teaching Moses? God stopped and parted the Red Sea. So this is one of those examples that we're going to see more and more and more, especially when we get into the New Testament, of things that reflect what happened in the Old Testament. Some people say, well, why do I need the Old Testament? It was the foundation of everything that was done. And then deliverance, Jesus coming, was the culmination of it. It says, as soon as the priest carried the ark, they reached the Jordan, and their feet touched the water. The water from upstream stopped flowing, and it piled up in a heap and let them go across. So the first thing that Joshua said after they got across, remember, we're transporting 12 tribes. Some of them are small, some of them are big. He says, assign one person the task of getting a rock. Put the rock beside the river, because this is going to be a reminder of what just happened. So if you were driving or walking by, you'd see those 12 stones. Oh, that's what happened. That's why sometimes we have memorials out and about in the forest, by the side of the road. It's to bring up the positive memories we've had before. was a problem. They had been wandering around in the desert for 40 years. They had stopped, many of them had stopped going to tabernacle at a regular time. Maybe some of them stopped praying at the dinner table. All of these different things. And Joshua said, well, now we're at the promised land. We got to start doing all those things again. The first thing they did was he called all the men and said, you will be circumcised. Now, these were adult men. Normally, you do it to babies. Well, they did it to all the men because none of them had been circumcised. Then, after they healed, they had a Passover dinner. Now, the Passover reflects what happened in Egypt. You remember, the angel of death came and killed all the firstborn. But what did the Hebrews do to stop him from killing people in their house? Can anybody share with me? The blood of the lamb. They put the blood over the door frame, and they did not kill them. So that's what Passover is to celebrate. And so he said, okay, we're going to celebrate Passover. And that's when they started doing that again. Now, Joshua sees Jericho, and he's out, I'm sure, thinking about what am I getting ready to do? God sent a soldier of God. Now imagine, you're 6 feet tall, and this 10-foot tall man appears to you. I would have been scared to death. Well, this 10-foot tall man said, I am God's warrior, and you are going to defeat Jericho. Now, of course, what's going through Joshua's mind is, we're going to have a battle. God has a better plan. Usually, God has a better plan. Now, Jericho was shut inside and out. Nobody was going in, and nobody was coming out. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I've given you Jericho. No, you haven't. It's still there. No, God said, I've given it to you. So the plan was, for 7 days, the Israelites walked around the city. Walked and walked and walked. On the 7th day, Joshua told them to be quiet. The priests blew their trumpets and horns, and the walls came tumbling down. That's how it happens. Now, of course, they still have to go in and defeat the people that are in the city. But they went in and defeated. Now, this was something that I learned in this story. God may give you a task. It may be a little task. See, the task was to destroy Jericho. Well, God did the major part. What was the major part he did? The walls came down. But now God expects you to be involved in the rest of it. Because some people say, well, why can't God just do that? Well, yeah, God could do that. But he wants you to be involved in it also. The fall of Jericho was one of the biggest miracles in the Bible. There are others that are greater, but this was something that lasted into memory. They wrote a song about it. We teach it to children in Sunday school. This was an event. Now remember, Rahab is in her house. The spies have said to everybody, okay, get their family. And that is what happened. Rahab joined the Israelites, and she ended up living with the Israelites the rest of the time. And that is where we stop until next week.
Okay.